Est-ce que le son, vous m'entendez bien? Ouais, ok. Bonjour, je suis très content d'être parmi vous. Merci Alice et Sciences Po pour l'invitation. On a 60 minutes à passer ensemble et je vais essayer de faire de mon mieux pour partager un peu de mon expérience et puis répondre aussi à vos questions. Je vais essayer de développer pendant 30-35 minutes quelques sujets qui me sont chers. Vous parlez du journalisme collaboratif, de ces enquêtes en consortium qui sont de plus en plus répandues, importantes, qui font parler d'elles et qui nécessitent une certaine méthodologie et qui racontent autre chose sur le journalisme. Donc je m'appelle Laurent Richard, j'ai bientôt 47 ans. J'ai créé Forbidden Stories il y a 6 ans de ça. Forbidden Stories, c'est le sous-titre en dessous, c'est Keep Stories Alive, parce que notre mission, c'est de poursuivre les enquêtes des reporters assassinés, menacés ou emprisonnés. Et on le fait avec cette mission en tête qui est de faire en sorte que les gens aient accès à des informations importantes. Des informations pour lesquelles des journalistes ont été assassinés ou ont été emprisonnés. On y reviendra tout à l'heure. Donc c'est une organisation qui est internationale, qui est basée en France, à Paris, et on travaille avec 150 journalistes dans le monde, 60 organisations de presse. Et donc on fait ce qu'on appelle du journalisme collaboratif et de l'enquête en consortium. Un mot sur, peut-être sur, quand moi j'ai commencé le journalisme, quand j'avais votre âge, c'était à l'époque assez bien vu et assez presque populaire de vouloir devenir journaliste ou d'être journaliste. Quand j'en parlais à mes parents... Oui, pardon, je vois une main qui se lève. And just, if I speak English, you mean? Yeah, I can do that in English, okay. If that's all good for you, okay. I will do my best. So when I was just explaining first about the mission of Forbidden Stories, who we are, that we are continuing the work of assassinated reporters and under threat reporters. It's a journalism-driven mission. We do that to make sure that people get access to critical information, information that are extremely crucial because it's about environmental crimes, corruption, money laundering, and people got killed for that. So our mission is to continue their work and to make sure that we can keep the stories alive. So I was then explaining that 25 years ago when I wanted to become a journalist, it was at that time quite popular to be a journalist. When I was sharing that kind of ideas with my families, with my parents, with my friends, it was quite cool because it was about traveling, it was about witnessing the history, it was about telling what was happening in the world. But now when I'm going into a dinner in Paris, when I'm going outside, usually I try not to explain that I'm a journalist. I think the vision and the perception of about who we are, what we are doing, has really changed a lot, and I will try to explain why and how we can react to that. We still even have a former president of the US who were qualifying the journalist as the enemy of the people. And so, yeah, it was quite popular 25 years ago. Now it's not really the case. You are almost as popular as a taxi driver in Paris now. So this is where we are. And I think that as well, that here at Sciences Po, you're very lucky to be there. It's a really great school of journalism. I know a lot of teachers here. I know that they are doing their best to transfer their knowledge. I know as well that here at Sciences Po, you will spend a lot of your time in your life, in your career as a journalist, to track as well your former friends of Sciences Po. Many of them in Sciences Po will become leaders of company, will become managers, will become CEO, and you will see as well how sometimes it's difficult to reach out to them, because you will see as well that they will feel really unhappy while they will be seeing your phone number on their device. Maybe they will never accept your phone call, because most of the time the question you will ask, the way you would like to have them on interview will make them uncomfortable. But that's your role as well. That's your role. And I'm sharing you that because being a journalist, asking tough questions is a responsibility. There is no democracy without journalism. There is no press freedom there is no democracy without press freedom. And you have a lot of responsibility into your hands in making sure that you are holding the powerful accountable. That's your mission. That's what journalism is about. When I start my career as a journalist, I start traveling a lot. I never been specialized, and that's something I can kind of advice I can give you as well. So I didn't went to any school of journalism. I wanted to become a lawyer at the beginning, and then I started an internship into a local TV station in south of France, in Toulouse. And when the first day I entered inside the newsroom, I really understand that was a job I wanted to do, because all around the newsroom, in that new ecosystem that I was discovering, I was discussing with many colleagues who were so open to the world, so with a mindset that was really extremely open. And I really understand that my curiosity, my nature, where I like to meet the people, to listen to them, and to tell their stories in the most honest way, was really something that can match and fit with that occupation that was a journalist. And so I never specialized myself into any kind of specialty. I was not a specialist of justice. I was not a war reporters, but I did many investigations into different kind of landscape. I went many times in Iraq, reporting on the conflict in 2003, 2004, in 2015 as well, when there were the fight against ISIS. I did a lot of investigation about the big tobacco companies, pharmaceutical companies, powerful industries. And then after doing that, as well, I was very passionate about the narrative, how to tell those stories. And that's a big challenge as well when you are an investigative journalist. Sometimes most of the time the story is extremely complex, and the narrative most of the time is very complex as well. And so if you don't pay attention to that, you can lose a lot of audience, a lot of your ability of your audience, your readers, to understand what you want to tell them. And that's extremely important to keep in mind, that exercise about what I can do to explain the most complex thing in the simplest way. And in 2011, Élise Lucet, for those who are French, maybe you know her. She's the host of Cache Investigation. She's the host of Envoyé Spécial as well. Asked me to co-create with her Cache Investigation, with this idea of how to tell complex stories about industries in a way where we can make as well some joke, where we can use humor, where we can spend 2 hours on tax avoidance, and not without losing millions of people as well. So that was extremely interesting, because it was really about thinking how I can use archives, cartoons, a specific narrative to entertain the audience while doing a very fact-checked, strict journalism with a very high standard in journalism. And so that was in 2011, so that was a long time ago, but I wanted to share you with that, because it's investigative journalism is not only about searching for the information, it's also about how to tell the story as well, and how to speak to most of the people. Something as well that is important to share. It's about when you are investigating, and then we're going to talk about collaborative journalism as well and consortium, but that's the basis of the investigation. You spend your time tracking people who don't want to answer you. And you spend your time tracking people, and maybe your other colleagues at Sciences Po will become leaders who will have around them a lot of PR person. And I spent my 25 last years in spending my time on conversation with a PR person who were all the time explaining me that was not part of the communication plan to talk to me or to other journalists about that kind of issue. For instance, I was investigating at some point in 2012, I think, or 2013, Philip Morris International, that is really one of the largest tobacco company in the world. And I was investigating them because they were publishing a study, asking a consultancy company to publish a study about what is the best way to convince governments to less tax the cigarettes. And one consultant was writing a study that was advising Philip Morris to explain that at some point people will die, and they find the age where the people usually die from that kind of cancer, the lung cancer. And it was around 64, 65. And it was precisely at the time where people used to finish their job and to be retired. So the study was explaining that a good way to pitch that to governments, to invite them and to incite them to ask people to pay, to ask governments to pay less tax, was to tell them those people will die, so it's less pensions that you will have to give them. And that kind of cynicism was on paper, was written on paper. And so I have to call Philip Morris International, of course, to ask them an interview about that and a reaction about that. And of course, they were not very happy with my question. They were sending me some PR person. They were aware about my investigation for 4 or 5 months before I reached out to them. And it was a very long battle to convince them to speak. And one way to convince them to speak was to explain that their consumers are also our readers. And so it's in the interest of the company, of the public opinion, of course, of the journalism, of journalists as well, to make sure that people will be all around the table to speak and to deliver that. But so, and to deliver an answer to the public opinion. So it's part of their responsibility to answer you, and it's part of your job to make sure that you give them a lot of chance to answer, even if that's not part of their communication plan. Sometimes, and maybe you have some friends who ask you the same question. Sometimes I've been asked about why do we need journalists on the planet? What is your role, actually? How do you think you can improve society? And I know that as well, about that, I noticed something last year when I was teaching here in that room, that I noticed as well that many of you wanted as well to become journalists now, which was not the case 25 years ago, because you wanted to produce some change in the society. And that's really new. I think 25 years ago, we wanted to become journalists to be the lone wolf reporters, alone on stage with the award, alone in the relationship with the source. And now I think, based on the situation where we are living with the climate change, with the disinformation, with the cyber surveillance, with all the big threats that democracy is facing, many of you want to become journalists because you want to be part of that large effort to change the society. And that's really, really great. And sometimes so people ask me, why do you think we need journalists on this planet? Or why do you think journalists are important? Or why do you think journalism is important? And I'm a bit tired about answering that. And one way I found to answer that is to explain and to give the people the numbers of journalists being killed every year, or the numbers of journalists being arrested every week. And I always explain that if you look at the numbers, you can see how many stories people wanted to kill by killing the messenger. And you can see how important journalists are, because they are challenging the powerful, because they are investigating the sand mafia in India, like Jagendra Singh, and he was killed because they were like Daphne Caruana Galizia in Malta, who was investigating money laundering at the top level of the government in Malta, which is part of the EU. And she was killed for that. or like Regina Martinez in Mexico. She was investigating links between drug cartels and politicians in the Veracruz Strait in Mexico, and she was killed for that. Those people, those journalists, those colleagues got killed every week, got arrested every week because they are challenging the powerful. They want to tell the untold stories. They want to break the PR effort of some companies by revealing what they are exactly doing. So this is why journalism is important. And the killers, the enemies of the free press, they know that. This is why we are targeted. This is why we are surveilled all the time. This is why you have some solution like Pegasus that is, you know, the spyware sold by the NSO group that is sold to dozens and dozens of countries all over the world to target not only journalists, of course, but mostly journalists as well. So this is my way sometime to explain when I got tired about why I think journalism is really key for to preserve democracy. To talk about collaborative journalism, something to have in mind that, and something that has changed as well a lot for the past 30 or 40 years, the kind of crime we are facing now is more and more global. Environmental crimes, corruption, money laundering, the money, the transfer of the money through the money laundering schemes are going everywhere in any kind of places, or offshore trust from Dubai to Switzerland to Paris to London, but as well to Bahamas. This is very international, this is very global. Same for the drug cartels. What is happening to a journalist who is killed in Sinaloa is not only a Mexican story, it's not only a Mexican case, it's a French story as well. The Sinaloa drug cartel is selling cocaine and other kind of drugs to 56 countries in the world. So that's the cocaine you're buying in Paris or in Chicago is mostly coming from that very same cartel. Same for all the environmental crimes. Last year with Forbidden Stories, we were continuing the work of Don Phillips and Bruno Pereira. They were investigating in Brazil, in the Amazon forest, environmental crimes. They were killed for that. But what is happening, of course, in the Amazon forest is really concerning for all of us. So facing that kind of crime, whether it's financial, environmental, where it's about human rights violation, we need a global answer to that. And it takes a network to do that. And it doesn't make sense to report on your own, alone, on the drug trafficking from Paris if you don't have a global vision to that. So you need a global vision, but you need talents to have that kind of global vision. People in Mexico, people in Colombia, they know much more than us how drug cartels are powerful. So we need to work with them. So this is why I think that collaborative journalism is the future of journalism. It's more and more global. We need to be more and more global. And we need to react. And I really believe that to defend journalism, to defend press freedom, to defend access of information, collaborative journalism is the best tool to do that, without doing any kind of advocacy. At Forbidden Stories, we don't ask governments to track the criminals. We are tracking ourselves, the criminals, in our role as a journalist. We are not prosecutor, we are not policemen, we don't have any weapons here, we cannot force the people to give us an interview. We just have our words and our trust in democracy to convince them that they should talk. And so this is why we need to team up when it's about a global crime. Not all the time, not all the stories require a collaborative effort. Sometimes it's a story that is happening in Paris, in south of France, in many cases, or in New York, and you can do the story yourself. But when it's global, and when you want to have a global perception of what the story is, you need to team up with other people. And especially when it's dangerous. And this is how we are doing with Forbidden Stories. When we start a project, we never start with a leak. We start only with the killing of someone. And we have someone, a reporter who has been killed, and we have a killer who is still free. So it's going to be very dangerous. The killer just killed someone. So if we want protection, we need collaboration. Why? Because it doesn't make sense to kill reporters if you know that 50 other reporters are continuing the work, are working on the same topic. And it's good and it's important to make us very visible. We are unstoppable. And this is why we are running that kind of project, because collaboration is bringing protection. Collaboration as well is bringing resources. When we are starting a project like we did with the Daphne project, that was our first project in 2017. Daphne was killed. The killers were putting a bomb under the seat of the car, and she died. And she died after years of harassment. She was, I think, under 56 libel suit for defamations, and some of them are still pending while she's dead. And so she was investigating many bad guys. It was very difficult at the beginning to understand what was the story that she was killed for, and to make sure that we can have an idea of what kind of story, what was the story she was killed for. We had to work with many other journalists. So the day after the killing of Daphne, I was having a conversation with Matthew, one of the 3 kids of Daphne, and I asked Matthew if he will be okay if a group of journalists will be continuing the work of her mother. And he told me, Laurent, that's the only thing I want. And this is what we did with all the journalists who were as well in touch with Matthew at that time, with Stephen Gray from Reuters, with Juliette Garcet from The Guardian, with Bastian Obermeier from Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany. We created the Daphne project. 45 journalists, 18 news organizations from all around the world, from the New York Times to Süddeutsche Zeitung, or La Repubblica in Italy, and many other news outlets. And that was one of the very first time that a group of journalists were continuing the work of another one. When I say that was one of the first time, because actually it was not the first time. The very first experience, collaborative experience in history of journalism was in 1976, the Arizona Project. That's a very important project that you should look at. Don Bowles, a reporter from Phoenix in Arizona, was killed, like Daphne, while he was starting his car. A bomb exploded and he was killed. When the rescue team arrived, he was able, before dying, in his last breath, to tell 3 words: the name of one guy. He was, I think, mentioning the name of, he was telling corruption, and the name of a company. And based on those 3 words, 35 journalists, the day after, came from all across the US in Phoenix, Arizona, to start the Arizona Project, 1976. The first example of how journalists able to teaming up. And when we are doing that now with Forbidden Stories, so we do that to add some protection. Collaboration brings protection. Collaboration brings resources. So, because you are dividing the work, you are creating teams, sub-teams, and you have to know how to do that. This requires leadership as well. It's not easy to have 50 people in the same room, sometimes 100. On the Pegasus project, we were 100. Same on the Story Killers project, that was a large investigation about disinformation. You need to team up with people who most of the time are competitors. So how to make that happen? That's sometimes difficult, but that requires a mindset. And the mindset is about sharing. Why you share? You share because you know that we will be stronger together. You know that you can benefit from the reporting from the others. You can benefit from the source from the other reporters who is sitting right next to you. You can include in your story, in your final piece at the end, all the quotes that the other reporters were able to get. And that's key. But collaboration is bringing protection, resources, but it's bringing also impact. Impact is key as well. If you are the ones I was mentioning before that who want to produce some change in the society by doing journalism and just journalism. Producing impact is key. What I mean by impact is creating a conversation that you put on the table, a story that leaders, civil society, NGO, people, the public opinion will talk about that. Like when we were publishing the Daphne project 6 months after a death, we asked Kantar, a company that is evaluating the reach level, the audience you have, by calculating the numbers of readers, viewers of your story. And what they told us that more than 20 million of people were having access to the Daphne project stories, from the New York Times webpage to the Süddeutsche Zeitung, Le Monde, Radio France, and others, or Envoyé Spécial in France. And it was about 20 million. It was 50 times, I think, way bigger and larger than the initial audience of Daphne. Daphne was running a blog called Running Commentary. And on Running Commentary, she was having 300,000 unique visitors per month. So what we did was to amplify precisely the story they wanted to silence. And so I think that much more people were aware about the corruption in Malta than before the killing. We were not only investigating the killing of Daphne, but we were continuing the leads. And we were able as well to identify the criminals who were behind the killing and how they were connected to the head of cabinet of the prime minister as well. So that was not only work of a journalist. The FBI was part of the official investigation on their side, so it was a global effort. But at the end, people were going on the street asking for the resignation of the prime minister, and he did resign. So this is as well why journalism and collaborative journalism is key to protect democracy and to create some impact. I wanted to share some other stories, and I prepared some slides, but just quickly as well about the methodology, and I have some slides about that. So this is a Daphne project. This is, that's just a slide that is comparing a journalist who is working solo versus a journalist who is a collaborative journalism, who is taking part into an investigation. On your end, this is what we have been trained for. And most of your classes, even now, you have been trained, or you are trained to become that guy, that person here, the lone wolf reporters, which is great sometimes, most of the time, actually. But you are alone, and you are alone with your stories. And the other model, of course, the mindset is very, very different. As I told you, it's about sharing, sharing, sharing. On one hand, when you do work alone, the big advantage and the benefit of that, it's you don't have any kind of compromise to make. It's cool. You just have your editor, you discuss with him, and you don't have to make some compromise. Why? When you are collaborative journalism, you spend your time on Zoom conversation or Jitsi conversation, and you spend your time making compromise. So that kind of adventure, when you do work like we do with Forbidden Stories, or when you're going to work with ICIJ, with OCCRP, you have more and more platform like us who are coordinating, facilitating large worldwide investigation. And you spend your time in that kind of platform where you are explaining your lead, what you can bring to the project, and sometimes it's not easy. But when you are just alone, your reporting is very limited, of course. You don't have too much resources to multiply your reporting, while when you are part of a collaboration, the world is yours. And this is what I was explaining. You can really use what the others are doing. When you are alone, you could be under very high pressure as well, because the PR person that I was mentioning before will call you 3 times per day to explain you that if you publish your story, you're going to be sued, and then you will have the lawyers against you. Many people as well you will see that in your career, that how many times people are calling your boss to explain that what you're doing is wrong, that you have some political views on your story. So you need to work, you need to identify in the company you will be working for your ally, and you need to work with a CEO, with the editor-in-chief that is really on your hand as well. That's very key. Not someone who will tell you, you should be very careful with that story and maybe we can postpone the publishing. While when you are part of a consortium, that will never happen because they know we are unstoppable. They know that we will be publishing the story in any cases. They know as well that it's going to be legally much more difficult for them to sue us because if they try to sue one, they have to sue the 99 other ones as well. And most of the time, they will be only threatening you to suing you, and they will never do that after that. But when you are alone, when you are working as part of a group, this is really easier. And of course, when you do work in your own newsroom, you only have 10 friends, and you can have much more friends when you are teaming up with other reporters. So that's really why I believe collaborative journalism is really the future. That need to be, this is what we were doing as well with the Sciences Po, that need to be the methodology to do that, the way to fact check the source when you are part of the group, the way to split the work, to prepare the plan of distribution of the stories, requires some methodology, some processes as well. So this is why it's good for you to train and to be trained all the time about that kind of journalism, because it's really different from the other kind of journalism. Something as well, just for the next 5 minutes, about where we are now in terms of why I think collaboration as well is key compared to 25 years ago. We are much more targeted now as a journalist. We are targeted in many ways, so we need to be stronger. So this is why we need to work in many cases as a group. We are targeted by cyber surveillance, as I was mentioning, much more than before. There are people who are making millions in this market where the target is you. And they are selling the spyware to states who are ready to pay, who are very, very okay to pay millions to infect your device. We were revealing the Pegasus project. We were coordinating the Pegasus project 2.5 years ago. At the beginning of the investigation, we were having access at that time to a leak. And on that leak, 50,000 phone numbers of people who were potentially surveilled by states who were the client of the NSO group. Many states who were having in common that they did buy previously the spyware. So on that list, we were able to see many phone numbers of journalists, politicians as well. We saw the phone number of Emmanuel Macron, the French head of state, but the entire French government as well. But and also a lot of dissidents in Mexico, dissidents who were from the Saudis, even the wife of Jamal Khashoggi. Jamal Khashoggi was entering inside the consulate, he was killed, and she was waiting for him outside. And as she was waiting outside, she was targeted by the spyware. I'm just mentioning that because when you are doing collaboration like that, you need to be very cautious about the way you are protecting your data, the way you are communicating. Something that is, because in front of you, and you will never see that because those attacks are very invisible, you will have a lot of enemies, a lot of people who will make sure to get some content from your phone and to use one day the data they got about you to blackmail you, to kill your reputation. That's the way to kill the stories or the access to information, is by killing the reputation of the messenger. And we see that in many cases. One of the cases that we saw that was when we were running another project called the Story Killers Project. That was, we were continuing the work of Gauri Lankesh. She was an Indian journalist, and she was killed in 2017 close to the city of Bangalore in India. She was killed as she was investigating the disinformation industry, the mercenaries of the disinformation. She was trying to investigate the link between BGP, the party that is in power in India, a nationalist Hindu party, and companies who were spreading fake news, not only against her, but only against many other journalists. And she was just killed for that. And so we decided to continue the work of Gauri, not only in India, but also as well to investigate the mercenaries of the disinformation in Africa, in Israel, in South America, in the US, in France, in the UK, in every places. And what we saw is a new kind of industry that's were surfacing, I think, 5-6 years ago only. That's really new. That's a mix. That's the nexus between two kind of industry. On one hand, you have the cyber surveillance industry, like the NSO and the others, and on the other hand, you have the influence guys, the PR person. And the two kind of industry are now creating their own global companies to make a kind of one-stop shop thing to run some hack and leak operation. They're going to hack you, take the content, transform the content, leak the content, kill your reputation. And they are doing that for private actors, for state actors. We were investigating, and part of the team was able to infiltrate, to run some undercover reporting inside a company called Team Rore. That was the nickname of the company. That was a company based in Israel. And that company, it was former guys from the intelligence community in Israel and other people from the influence. And what they were able to do was to create some negative and viral tweet about you, opponents, dissidents, and they were able to do that thanks to AI. And so our reporters were infiltrating them, were testing them, and they were asking some demo. And the guys were doing some demo live in front of the hidden camera. Of course, they were not aware that we were filming at that time, but they were able to enter some negative, to ask the platform, they call that AIMS, Advanced Impact Media Solution. In 10 seconds, they can generate 10 tweets and make them very viral. And to make them very viral, we asked them even at that time to create, to see if they can create a very viral hashtag. And at that time, it was during the summer 22. I don't know if you remember, there were an animal called the emu, E-M-U. We say emu in France. And the breeder of the emu was very popular and was doing some video with the GoPro and saying to the very fun emu, was trying to break the GoPro all the time. And she was telling her in conversation with the emu, saying, "Don't do that, Emmanuel." The name was Emmanuel. And that was very popular at that time. Millions of people were retweeting that. We asked them to let the world believe that the emu was dead. And so they were creating an hashtag called RIP Emmanuel. And the RIP Emmanuel became viral. The hashtag RIP Emmanuel became viral. And even on the day after that, in the morning after that, the breeder was waking up, discovering that there was a RIP Emmanuel everywhere on the social networks, and she ran into the farm to see if Emmanuel was still alive, and he was still alive. And so she made a public statement that this is wrong, she was not understanding what was happening, and then later on we explained her that it was part of a testing for the purpose of an investigation. But they were able to do that. They were able to hack the Telegram account of an opponent in Kenya. And the goal of this investigation was also to identify the face and the name of those people. At the beginning, they were hiding their face. And at the end, the reporters from Haaretz and Radio France were collaborating with us, were able to meet in person. And this is where collaboration makes sense, because they meet some people, and through some techniques to recognize the face of the people that we were, so having some screenshot of the camera with the face of the person. We were having as well access, that was the Guardian team, the investigative team in the UK from the Guardian, who was having access to some leak where it was about, they were mentioning Team Rore, and they were able to find the name of the guy who was leading that company, Tal Anan. And so the reporters were on the field, not they were not able to understand or to know what was the identity. And the reporters at The Guardian was having access to a leak from Cambridge Analytica leak, and they were able to identify the guy. The guy was a former contractor of Cambridge Analytica, and this is how we understand who was those guys and what they were doing before, and that they were really involved in the manipulation of many elections all around the world. They claim to be behind the manipulation of 30 elections in 30 countries. So that was really a lot. And so this is how as well we saw that they claim at some point that they were able even to manipulate the French public opinion. And our reporters ask, how do you do that? Did you really do that? They say, yes, we did that. Look at BFM TV and Rachid Embarki. We were able to, through BFM TV, to spread some content for customer offers. And so we were revealing that case that some of you might know, that Rachid Embarki were receiving some materials on a USB key and a USB stick and was spreading that fake news on the BFM TV, which is kind of major station in France, and that was a fake news. Now there is an investigation. The middleman involved in that was arrested 2 days ago, but that was only possible thanks to that kind of collaboration. So we are much more surveyed than before with the spyware. We had much more harassment online as well, especially female journalists. We are much more suffering from disinformation network that are really now part of a new kind of industry. So this is why that kind of consortium makes really sense, because we are really stronger like that. So this is a few words I wanted to say, to share with you, and I'm happy now to answer any of your questions. Thank you. Yes, here. The mic is coming to you.
Hi, and thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. I was just wondering, how do you decide who's going to work on a project? Do people contact you? Do you contact other journalists? Is it word to mouth? Mouth. How do you say this in English? Word to mouth. Word of mouth. Thank you. I forgot the word in English, but how do you create this team of journalists?
Yeah. That's a good question, and the answer is sometimes difficult. But the first thing is to know about who are the journalists in the world who are really okay and comfortable with that process, and we know that by identifying them in previous other projects run by other organizations like ICAG or CCRP. Some people are well known to be very collaborative. Others are well known to have so strong ego that we don't want to work with them. Even big star in journalism. Sometimes it's better to have smaller names, but who will be bringing to the group a bigger effort and a bigger work and a lot of information for the story. So we try as well to. The first thing we are doing is to, since we are reporting abroad, is to meet with local journalists. They know better than us the situation. They know better than us the risk in reporting in that specific part of Colombia, for instance. They will be on the ground after the publication as well. So all the risk assessment need to be done with them, and we need to go through all the questions about what might happen to you when we will be back in Paris or in other places. So first, we do work with local reporters. Then we do work with reporters who can bring their talents. And we try to set up a dream team at the beginning of every project. Who will be the burst partner offering some OSINT technicals? We need to have access to satellite pictures to investigate the illegal logging in that part of the Amazon. So we need to work with a good team on that. We need to have people who will have a lot of access in the intelligence community, because we need to understand how this country is surveilling this other country, for instance. So we need to find the good guys on that. So we are creating a specific team for every specific project we are we are starting. And then we are setting up some rules as well, that everybody needs to share respecting the communication protocols as well. That's very important to keep confidential. A few words about confidentiality. Sometimes we journalists get confused, can be a bit bragging about, yeah, it's very confidential, I cannot tell you, but after 2 years, you know everything. That's a big trap as well. We like to talk a lot and sometimes be very cautious about that. Why? It's not only about the story you're going to publish. Sometimes, even if people are aware about their story, that's fine. There is no... The risk is much more for the people who are trusting you, the people who are taking a lot of risk to provide you a document from their company, from the administration they are working for. They can be killed for that. They can be jailed for that. They are ready to take a lot of risk for that. So that's really key. As you can see, last week, Ariane Lavrieux from Disclose was arrested. I think she spent 39 hours in custody. She was interrogated. They were doing that because they wanted to investigate and to identify who was the source. So that's very crucial, that even if in your news organization you're going to work for, to explain to the potential sources, to your future sources that you don't know yet, the way to reach out to you. That's key. Because most of the time, when sources are identified later on after your publication, they will be identified because of the first contact. That's what we call the first contact trap. It's because they're going to contact you using their computer from the offices. That's a big mess then, because later on, the CEO of the company, the security services of the company, have the power to investigate your device and have the power to open your emails and to see that you were the one breaking the internal rules as well. And you can be prosecuted for that, or they can ask you to pay millions for revealing that trade secret. So that's very important to keep that in mind, is in your relation with your sources. And that raises other question when you do work with collaboration like that, and you are bringing your own resources, your own sources, sorry. But sometimes I think collaborative journalism is also very reassuring for the sources, because they know that we are unstoppable. They know that not only the stories they are helping you to break will be not only published in France, but in many other countries at the same time. So that's a good way as well to keep your sources very on board with your project. Other question? Yeah.
Yes, I had a question. You already answered a little bit of it, but it's about the sources. Are they in more danger in collaborative journalism? I mean, is it also a collaborative sharing of sources, which means that there are many journalists who may or may not say what's going on? And if you don't share your sources, how does the trust work between the journalists about having a trustworthy source or not?
Yeah, thank you for the question, because that's a very important question as well, is how to preserve the identity of your source while sharing the material that your source is providing to you. So there are no golden rules in that. It's a case by case. What we are usually doing, that if you bring your own sources to a group like that, only a very few restricted numbers of people around the reporter who is bringing the source or the material from the source will be aware of the name of the source. Or sometimes you even don't need to know the name of the source when it's not your source, because the documents are talking for themselves. Because by investigating, by fact-checking what you can see on the documents, the number of that bank, the name of that company, the name of that guy, you can easily fact-check through open sources the authenticity of the document. So that's the way we proceed in traditional newsroom and in collaborative newsroom, that you need to investigate the document and not only base your trust in the source only in what he's saying, but what is the materials that he's providing.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask a question about the training. Like, how do you get
About what, sorry?
the training? Like, how do you get trained to become like a collaborative journalist? Is it like too ambitious to begin with like collaborative journalism?
No, it's not too ambitious. It's not too ambitious at all, because that's first there is so something to say that collaboration doesn't mean that it's all the time need to be big. Collaboration could be the collaboration between two newsrooms, between two freelancers, between one newsroom and one organization that is not in journalism, because they are providing, like Amnesty International Security Lab, we were partnering with them on Pegasus project. They were providing their ability to run some forensic analysis on devices. So collaboration can have really different kind of faces and way to do that. So no, I think it's of course you need to first, I think, learn about investigative journalism, basically. All the main question you need to go through about the fact-checking, about the narrative, about the hypothesis you have at the beginning. But then if you combine that with the methodology, the process that are very specific to collaboration, you can still, you can then do that next year. There is no need for that. I really think that School of Journalism, and this is what we were doing as well at Sciences Po, need to be much more involved in the training of collaborative journalism. I really believe in that. I was in Sweden 2 weeks ago for the Global Investigative Journalism Conference. 2,100 journalists were there from 132 countries, and there is not a lot of schools in the world who are really giving some spaces for collaborative journalism as a practice. So I think this is a global need as well. Yes. Yeah, wait for the mic. I think it's going to be better for the group.
Okay, so sorry for my accent and sorry for my very pragmatic question, but we all know the classic economic media model in which sports will finance investigation, yeah. But in your case, there is only investigation and over a very long time. So how do you do to finance your thousands friends?
And that's not a problematic question. Money is part of the businesses as well. You need money to do that. You need to pay people to run coordination like that. So our model is exactly based on the same model as ICIJ or CCRP or other organization involved in that. We are a non-profit and we rely on donation. Most of the money we do have is coming from foundations who are based in the US or based in the north of Europe. In the US, there are a lot of non-profit in journalism, like ProPublica, for instance. ICIJ is based in the US as well, where you are knocking on the door on foundations. Sometimes that's foundation for billionaires from the tech who are supporting non-profit in journalism, non-profit in education, in other kind of topics or spaces. And they are paying less tax by providing you some grants like that. So that's the way we are doing with Forbidden Stories. So part of my job is to run a company as well. And that's very key as well when you are setting up that project like that. You can do that without specific money to that if the collaboration is quite small. But when it's big, yeah, you need to have full-time people to coordinate. So you need to pay some salaries, and you need to find the money to pay those salaries. So you need to run some organization. And running an organization is also as well something that need to be where you need to be trained as well. And I've never been into any kind of training to become entrepreneur, but now really my job is sometimes being less journalist and more the CEO of. It's not Facebook, it's not a big thing, but we're still 21 people full time. So it's and we were 2 5 years ago. So that's and that requires some resources as well to become an entrepreneur. And I should say as well that I receive a lot of help from the Ashoka, which is the largest network of social entrepreneurs in the world. and they are providing some training now for the past year to make sure we can scale up as well, to identify how the business model, how to work, how to develop some strategy to scale up for the partnership, for the publication, for the impact as well. Something to say as well about the impact. We are publishing at once on many places, in many continents, the same stories. But as I was telling you at the beginning, there are two challenges when you are investigative journalism. First is to make sure that you're going to reveal. Investigative journalism is about revealing some new facts for the public opinion, for the general interest. But then you need to be able to tell that in a compelling way, because otherwise you're going to spend 1 year in one complex stories and nobody will read it. And you want to produce some change. So now we are, as you know, better than me because you are way younger than me. The way to read the investigation, to access the information, changed a lot those past 5-6 years. With I have 2 kids. One of the 2 is 16 and is only getting access to information through TikTok. So now our question with many other newsrooms is how to really produce compelling investigation through TikTok. How to make it happen, and we have to make it happen because otherwise we will only talk to people who are really convinced about journalism, and that's not what we are looking for. On our end, with Forbidden Stories, we try to send the signal to enemies of the free press. You kill the messenger, you will never kill the message. We are here. But they don't read the Washington Post, they don't read the Guardian. Maybe they will listen to an influencers on the ground, and we have to identify that influencer or that TikTok account they are following to make sure we can send the message through this channel. So that's the challenge as well for when you want to become an investigative journalism, is to think about your audience and how to engage the audience with your content. Yeah.
Hi. I was wondering, you were just talking about how you reveal things, and that obviously changes something. But maybe you could talk a little bit about the aftermath, because once the story is out, I imagine you don't just drop it.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's the key thing as well. That's good to talk about that and about the risk of burnout, which I really want to mention because this is really under address in journalism. And specifically in investigative journalism, where you are following a lead and the story will be never over. Never. And sometimes, and quite frequently, the story will start the day of your publication because you are publishing your stories and then new sources coming to you. And you were having some other plans to run other stories, and then you stick to that. And that can create, at some point, you can feel very isolated when you are an investigative journalist. So this is why collaboration is good as well, because you have many friends where you can share even your personal feelings. And the risk of burnout in our newsroom is extremely high and is really under address. Please keep that in mind. And it's not only about the toxic management, it could be about the pressure that you put on yourself and you never share with others that. And you have a lot of pressure because you're targeted, because you will have disinformation against you, and because your source will call you every 2 hours to tell you that he's afraid for his life, and you are the only person who can share that. So it could be very difficult, emotionally speaking, as well. So this is why in the newsroom you're going to work for, try to find some spaces to communicate about that with other colleagues, with a group like that, and never feel shy about that. Never. Otherwise, you're going to be targeted yourself by that at some point. And so that's key to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So I just have a question on quite the same topic. It's about management, because I guess it's not easy. It's not something we might be learning about. So I would like to have your opinion on this, because 100 journalists, like getting crazy because they have great information, or like being scared, or like emotions, basically, how you can just manage people under pressure?
Yeah. So there is two things. First, the newsroom are joining us. So we are not their bosses as well. And so every publication remains extremely independent on the editorial, on the resources they are assigning they are investing in this specific project. So when we do collaborate with partners, we have two kind of conversation with the reporters and with the management to make sure that we are on the same page, that we understand the same thing, that the management will give enough resources to the journalist, and then they have their own policy regarding all of that. Then we have our team at Forbidden Stories, where we are 21. So of course, as to run that, when you do work on different kind of on every time zone with hundreds of reporters, when you are part of more than, like me, 250 signal group, you have to shut down all the notification first, that to survive. Otherwise, you cannot talk for more than 10 seconds without receiving a signal. And yes, you have to have some time frame all the time in mind. That's key as well. Otherwise, as I said, an investigation is never over. So you need to decide about your own time frame. I want to publish that story in 6 months from now. And so if I'm able to if I want to target that date, I need 1 month before to have the draft ready, 3 weeks before to have them fact-checked, 2 months before that to make sure that we have some reporters on the field. So to identify the reporters, you need to create some teams 2 months again before that. So you are creating your planning like that. When do you want to publish? And then you start to go back and to see what is the best process to do that. And you have to be strict on that, because at some point, the people in the US will tell you, oh, we have an election that day, we cannot publish. Or in India, they will say, yeah, that's a holiday, and so it's not possible to. So you need to make a lot of compromise. You need to keep that very democratic as well. You don't want to be the organization based in the north and solving the problems of the south. You need to be very, very cautious about that as well in the inclusion, in the way you are learning, discussing for people. People are joining our group without any kind of resources, while others can have 5 reporters full-time as well. But you need to keep their voices as equal than the biggest one as well. So that's, yeah, so for that you need people who are excellent in the coordination. At Forbidden Stories, we do work with Sandra Rodrigo, who is coordinating that. We do work with many journalists who are not only investigating, but they are making sure that all the reporters around lead by lead are aware and are updated and are on the same page. And we use platform where we do share the information, and everyone can go to the platform with a double authentication process to see where we are on that specific lead. Okay, last question. Mistéo.
How do you cope with all the risks that were on the shoulders of the journalists who were killed, and whose stories you covered afterwards? And how do you deal with the risks and all the dangers and the threats that are on your shoulders, since you're very exposed and Forbidden Stories is very famous now? Yeah, so as I said during the presentation, we discussed with local partners on the field. The first thing, when Rafael Moreno was killed in Colombia, so Rafael was a journalist from north of Colombia. Last October, early October 22, he reached out to us through the SafeBox network. I didn't mention that, but we created the SafeBox network, that is a digital place for journalists at risk who can secure their ongoing investigation. And if something happened to them, then we will be able to open the box and continue their work. And they can even claim publicly that they have a backup somewhere. Rafael did contact
were contacting us a few early October 22. He was very concerned about the threats he was receiving from different kind of bad guys. He shared with us what he was investigating, and 4 days after he was killed. 2 days after the killing, or 1 day after the killing, we were there. We went to Colombia, and the first thing that we did was to collaborate and to meet with local journalists around Raphael, to meet his wife as well, to meet his family, to collect some documents as soon as we can to make sure that we can still have access to materials, and to discuss with local journalists who are aware about the situation, who know better than us the risk. And so we do the risk assessment process with local journalists. What we can do in this area? How can we take a taxi to go to this place? Who's the driver we should work for to make sure that he's not giving us to the cartel 2 days after. So the risk assessment needs to be done with people to evaluate the risk for the reporting phase, but as well to the risk after the publication. What might happen, not only to the journalists who work with us, but to the people locally who talk to the journalists, and how to proceed to make sure that the neighborhood will not be aware about our meeting with that person. So they might think after the publication that this person living in this street is the source of forbidden stories partners. So this is extremely difficult to do, but we are very cautious about that. Then on our end, about the risk for ourselves at forbidden stories, of course, we are very exposed. Of course, we are very surveilled as well, and we are aware of that, and so we take a lot of, we do some bug bounty on the website. We do work with hackers with us who are checking our digital instances. We have many phones, many devices to talk. When we were running the Pegasus project, we were investigating 10 states were using a spyware plus a very secretive and offensive company. So that was quite challenging to stay under the radar. And the only thing we didn't want was to be the next one on the list. So we had to be very creative to find ways to communicate. And I think we did quite well. But the risk is high, but I really think that the best protection is who we are. We are a group. So even if something happened to me, the story will be continued. The work will continue. And so I think that because we are a group, we are unstoppable, and it doesn't make sense to kill any of us because we are that kind of group, that kind of journalists doing that. Merci à vous. Merci, c'était un plaisir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Merci. Et n'hésitez pas à aller sur le site de Forbidden Stories. Please feel free to go on the website and to contact me anytime. You can find my email address on the website if you need. Thank you.